Hello, hello. Welcome to Rise and Shine with Morning Moon. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit that bell so that you're notified every time we go live and we have new videos here at Wellness with Watson and Rise and Shine with Morning Moon. Be sure to anchor in with the Wellness Foundation's checklist in our group Rise and Shine with Morning Moon. And today it is Friday. It is a beautiful day, second day of May. The sun is shining. And we are going to close out the week with a little bit of talk about something deep and that I have sat with long, hard-won battles and sleepless nights. And that is silence. And today I'm talking about silence in terms of complicity and how it cannot always be safe to be silent, and how it's not about um what we fail to do. It's it's what we fail to speak up and say and do what's right. And I want us to, and I started thinking about this because I was watching, I don't know if you guys watch Netflix, but I was watching Netflix, and um he the brother-in-law was talking about being complicit can be deadly, and how silence isn't safe and it can be deadly. And it got me thinking about times in my life where I have been silent and times in my life where I have spoke up, and despite what everybody else wanted me to say or think or do, I spoke up, and I may have lost friends, people, places, and things because I spoke up, but I wasn't complicit. And I want you to start thinking about, where in your life are you complicit simply because you're not speaking up, simply because you're not taking a stand. I'm not talking necessarily about the big, obvious wrongdoings, those big things, but sometimes we're silent when there's big wrongdoings. But I'm talking about those daily things, those tiny betrayals we commit against ourselves in the name of keeping the peace. Those conversations we dodge, those boundaries that we set along the wayside, those truths that we just keep pushing down, and we are afraid that they will cost us friendships or relationships, or that we're not ready, something we're not ready to lose. And we can think a lot in this context when it comes to the events of 2020. Where were we complicit? Simply because we were laying our own worries and cautions to the wayside. you know where in our life are we complicit simply because we're quiet? What's the cost of that? And when we trade our voice for comfort, it doesn't create peace. We're seeking peace always, but trading your voice for comfort doesn't create peace. It just creates more avoidance and creates more awkward space. And avoidance often breeds things like resentment and bitterness and chaos and disconnection. And we become disconnected with others. We become disconnected with relationships. We become disconnected from ourselves. We become disconnected from the things that we love. And then eventually we become dissociated. So when we are not speaking up and we are not living the truth, you know, there's a power of silence, but there's also, a price to silence. I've walked through this myself. I've learned the power of being silent, but I've also learned the 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 power of having a voice. Those moments where I refuse to remain quiet about the injustices of the world and the anti-human atrocities. You know, I lost people. I lost family. You know, People asked me if that was the hill I was willing to die on. And yes, it was. And I paid the price. I paid the price. But ultimately, um, ultimately, because people couldn't bear to hear the uncomfortable truths, I saw who who the real ones were, who the real friends and family and the true people that love me were. And ultimately, my voice and those moments that I spoke up and I connected others who were willing to listen, that created a ripple effect that had a result to this day that I read about in the papers. I refused silence, knowing full well that people I cared about deeply would disagree and even that some would walk away. And I lost relationships that I treasure deeply. And to this day, we're no longer friends on Facebook, or we are no longer friends in real life. We are disconnected because they don't want to hear about my politics. And when it has nothing to do with politics, it has to do with human rights. And that's the hill I'm willing to die on. And losing others is heartbreaking, but losing my values in the process is even more devastating. And not having the impact that I've had would have been more devastating, because the result of not being fearful and speaking up and having those meetings and connecting those people and having those moments, the result from that was huge. It was huge, and it impacts through generations, and silence, it's not being neutral, it's complicit. It's being complicit. It's not being kind. Being silent is not being kind. When there are injustices or there is something wrong going on or something in your soul that doesn't feel right, you need to speak up, because silence is not kindness, it's fear. We must speak up to the injustices of the world. We must speak up for the things that our heart finds to be, incorrect. Speak up. Silence is not where growth is at. It's stagnation. Silence is the comfort. Each time we remain silent when our spirit calls for action, we fracture that alignment with the divine. We fracture that alignment with God. We fracture that alignment with truth. We fracture that alignment with our deepest, deepest self. And when we stay quiet, we allow more of the same to go on, and more injustice and more BS and more of tyranny, and you become part of it. So we need to ask ourselves, what do we allow? What do we allow that is an unacceptable? And what do we pretend not to see? We don't want to be awake pretending to be asleep. It's the worst thing in the world to pretend to be asleep when you're really awake and there's when the house is burning down. You're awake, pretending to be asleep, the house is burning down around you, everybody's screaming, hey, but you're just pretending to be asleep. Why? Why? And what are you pretending not to see? Is it because acknowledging it would have forced you to act and make you uncomfortable? What is discomfort? Monday we'll talk about discomfort. Even little things like conversations you're avoiding because you don't trust yourself enough to remain anchored through that discomfort and remain firm in the truth and your boundaries and what you believe to be right. I personally believe that being complicit and silent, it has consequences. Not just for everything around us, but for us ourselves and for the health of our own spirit. We're not meant to be lukewarm. We're not meant to be comfortable. We're not here on this earth to be comfortable. There is a calling on your life. There's a divine design, and we are being called for clarity and courage and conviction. Be convicted. Have some fire. So when you know in your soul something's not right, don't push it away. Invite it in. Wake up. Wake up. Stop pretending to be asleep while you're awake and the house is burning. Speak up. It's not easy, but it's essential. And that is how we anchor into truth and we grow into the person that the divine design and the calling on our life and that God has divined us to be. So refuse the false comfort of silence today and this weekend. Go out, enjoy the sunshine, anchor into your daily wellness foundations, and have a beautiful, beautiful weekend. Keep rising, keep shining. Just remember the only thing that silence guarantees is stagnation in pretty much all contexts, unless you're not having moments of silence where you can connect in. That's a whole different thing. But this is a call to your soul. When you know that there are things that aren't right, calls you're not answering, things you're not doing, things other people are doing that are not right, things the world that are going on in the world that you know feel wrong. So the only way forward is to anchor in deeply into the truth, and refuse that false comfort of silence. So choose clarity, choose courage, choose integrity. Life is not easy. Things are not free, but they are sovereign and they are beautiful. So have a beautiful weekend. It's May. Go enjoy. I will see you on Monday. Rise and shine, my friends. Ciao.